much as I was going to say about that. But essentially, we know from the latest UN report in May that they looked at what's happened over the last 50 years, 15,000 academic papers were reviewed, and they've looked at the impact on biodiversity, and we know that there's been something like a 56% already hit on populations, and we all know that that's getting worse and that we face ecological collapse. On the climate change, similarly the UN and the IPCC had a pivotal report in autumn last year, and that basically said that we have 12 years not to start doing something, we have 12 years to turn around everything on climate change. And essentially, in terms of what the IPCC said, it's not the same as XR is saying, but they were saying we've got to halve global emissions by 2030. And that essentially means in this country we have to halve transport emissions by 2032. On the financial issue, I want to sort of home in on just the council actually. I mean, we all know about the financial collapse, and all these issues are very interrelated, but just to sort of localise it to the issue we're talking about, over the last 10 years, the county council has undertaken austerity like all councils, and they've cut the major services, children's services, adult social services, totally to the bone. And as someone said to me this morning, I think yourself, that there actually isn't austerity when it comes to road building. And this is the case. They actually are building up debt. They currently, under the national thing which loans money to councils, they've got a debt of £650 million, and they're repaying at a rate of £28 million a year in interest, servicing that loan. There's $1 million or $2 million of that for the NDR in there. If this road is built, which is going to, they're saying 152 million as of Friday, we think it's going to be more like 350 million because there's always road inflation, and they haven't taken into account the complexity of some of the roundabouts, particularly the one at Honingham, which has got to join up with the A47, and the one over the other side of the river, sort of where you come out of Helsdon, where it's going to join onto the NDR. Both of those need to be grade separated roundabouts, very, very expensive, and they haven't fully costed that. So it's going to be more like 350 million, and that's going to all go into borrowing money. They'll get some of it from the government, and the rest of it they will loan because they really haven't got the money to pay for it. They haven't got the money to pay for the NDR. They overran on that. We still don't know what the final cost on that is. I believe it's about £250 million, which is a little bit more than what the council is saying, around about £205 million. So that's just background really on the three collapses. And in all of those you have an intergenerational debt. This road scheme is actually a crime because it is creating an intergenerational debt on climate, ecology, and on economics and finance to the next generation. They're the people who are going to be paying that bill. They're the people who are going to be trying to deal with climate collapse, and that's got a big financial association with it too, and also ecological collapse, whether we will actually be getting food shortages in the next decade or two, and so on. That generation are going to have to deal with that, and this road is going completely against everything we ought to be doing on that. So just a bit of detail on those three things, ecological, climate and finance, with this particular scheme, with what came out on Friday. We know that it's Route C that's been selected, and the Norfolk Wildlife Trust is actually opposed to all the schemes. Route C isn't quite as bad ecologically as Route D would have been, but it still goes through a country wildlife site, it goes very near ancient woodland. But more than that, with this river here, you have a Norfolk chalk stream, and that is a very, very unique environmental heritage actually. Most of the chalk streams in the world are in the UK, and there's something like 10 or 11 of them in Norfolk. And there's a video which I've been putting out about the Norfolk chalk streams, which tells you what a unique habitat they are. And of course it's not just the river itself, it's what it draws in the wider ecology. There's also the issue of ecological networks. All wildlife requires to be able to move around to thrive, and this road is just going to cut straight through. Now, an example, it's not always obvious how that might affect things, because you might think, well, it's only 100 metres wide, oh, it's not that bad, but actually when they do the construction, they're going to create a corridor possibly more like 300 or 400 metres wide, and that can have a permanent disruption just in the construction. Over at Plumsteads, I have a friend who's a parish councillor on Plumsteads. Where they built the NDR, they had a very wide construction corridor, and now they don't see the bats they used to see. And what's happened is there was an ecological network along oak trees and the pathway, and that was severely severed. And although the road may be thinner at the end of the day, that disruption for a year or two has knocked out the bat colonies in that area. So what we see happening is little ecocides, and when you look at that with the UN report and put it in the context of that report, what we're seeing is little ecocides. All the little ecocides add up, and then all those bigger ecocides lead to ecological collapse. And that's the thing about this road. They're saying, oh, we will have positive biodiversity gain. What they mean by that is, for the trees they chop down, they'll plant other trees somewhere else. Now, if you look again what they've done on the NDR, 7,000 trees on the NDR, and what you have now are little sticks in those plastic things along the side of the road, and that is supposed to be biodiversity gain. It's a total scam, it's absolute nonsense, and we're in an ecological collapse, and we shouldn't accept that. Now, on the climate, the county council has done nothing but lock in people to car use for many years. Their transport policy has basically been about making it easy for people in cars. And with the NDR, we know that the transport emissions went up by 6% just putting the NDR in. And that's on top of a million tonnes of CO2 a year from the Norfolk transport system. That is like burning 400,000 tonnes of coal every year in Norfolk. Now this scheme, they've done a slightly more localised analysis I looked at on Friday, and I don't know all the details on this, but basically it's adding 4,000 more tonnes by the time it opens. So they're saying, well, 4,000 tonnes, that's not a lot, compared to the million we burn already. But what you have to understand about that is that the IPCC report and also the Committee on Climate Change and the government say we have to cut transport emissions. We have to cut those by 50% in the next 10 years. And Norfolk, meanwhile, say, well, come 2024, we'll just be adding another 4,000 tonnes, and everything else is just staying level. So again, it's not the minor increase which is the problem. The major not cutting the transport emissions is the major problem. So I just want to touch on the public transport solution and how actually the public have been conned by the County Council on this. I was at the public inquiry on the NDR, and when we realised we weren't going to stop it completely, we negotiated with the planning inspector effectively that along with the NDR they had to bring in a £141 million scheme which was going to put in something called bus rapid transit. And bus rapid transit basically is very modern bus services where you have very frequent, the services are worked out so they're low cost. They basically have dedicated lanes, the traffic lights change from the sort of thing you'll see in progressive cities in France, Germany and other places in Europe. that sort of system has been put forward. Actually, it's been put forward for Norwich since 2008. Can you see any of it? Well, a little bit on the Durham Road. They basically haven't done it. But what we had with this deal with the planning inspector was that they had to come up with the action plan to do this before they opened the NDR. And they basically didn't do it. So they broke the law. They're fraudulent in that, in my view. But more than that, they've totally let down the Norfolk and Norwich people in doing that. And that is one of the things we must campaign for very, very strongly on the other side of the stopping the road, is to get that transport system in. Now, they happen to have got what I call a get out of jail free card, in that the government have got some funding for exactly this sort of scheme, cycling, walking and bus schemes, and they've applied for that, and they may get £100 million for that, but it's not going to do what they even that's not going to do what they promised back in 2015, because that £141 million 215 with inflation is now to like £250 million. By the time they do what they're doing, it is 300 million. You know, they're going to maybe do £100 million if they get the funding. So we're going to get probably a third of what we should have been getting. So we have to push, and of course, as people said today, the money they want to spend on this road, coming back to the financial thing, the 350 million they want to spend on this by the end of the day, would build that public transport system. And of course it's got to be a public transport system which helps people out here too. But you know, there's ways of doing that. There are counties in this country which are already doing schemes which help rural areas, and that's what we really need to push for. I've probably spoken for long enough, and Richard's going to talk more about the solutions, but what I'd just like to tell people, anybody who doesn't know, that on the decision to go for this Route C is July the 15th, and they will be making that decision at a cabinet meeting, 10 councillors deciding this. I mean, they've already decided, of course, and they probably won't even discuss it for very long in the meeting. But Extinction Rebellion is organising a protest. It will be colourful and vibrant. There will be things for everybody to take part in this, and I'd encourage everybody to join up to this, to come to this. Come if you can at 10 o'clock to County Hall. If you don't know exactly, so not 10 o'clock, 8 o'clock at County Hall, the meeting's at 10 o'clock. Come if you can, and if you don't know exactly where to go, ask someone, and they'll tell you exactly where we're meeting and so on. And that will be a protest outside the council building. As I say, colourful and vibrant. It will make the message in the media. Make the message in the media. And that's the very important thing. So thank you very much for listening. I'd like to hand over to